Are you replaceable? And I mean that in terms of, are you, as a travel advisor in the travel industry, replaceable by AI? That's what we're going to jump into during this conversation. So let's get started.
This is the Art of Selling Travel Podcast. And here to guide you through it all, your host, Glenda Beagle.
This idea of being replaced or being replaceable is something that's really been something even I've had to face in the last little while here. Recently, I got fed an ad from a business coach that was selling a course all on how to create a coach bot to replace yourself. I thought, for real? That's what we're doing now? We're just simply going to replace ourselves. And so, with that, I've had to do a lot of thinking about it. And it's been something that just little parts of, well, frankly, the universe started to kind of line up everything in a row and started to give me signs that I knew this is the direction we were headed in. And so, here's my question for you. When you create a business built on a foundation of all the ways that you can replace yourself, how can you be upset when you get replaced? How can you be upset that AI took over everything when you build a business to have AI do it? And now, don't get me wrong, I am not anti-AI in any way, shape, or form. I use AI a ridiculous amount in my business. The difference being, I leverage it to create more efficiency and I leverage it to speed me up. Now, ironically, it also is creating a level of content or allowing us to do things that, while in theory speeds us up, it's also slowing us down because now we're getting over inundated. And so it was actually, again, just everything going on. It was so funny because I also got an email from another travel business coach who was proudly announcing their new coach bot, because they're going to be putting a bot in place to do the coaching for them. And it's so funny because when I look at everything that's happened in the last few weeks, in particular, I think it was about 2 weeks ago, the televisions in our house went out. And I'm assuming it must have been some sort of update with the telesystem, something like that. I don't know. But all of the TVs in the house stopped working. So it wasn't just a malfunction of one unit. So my husband had to call in. And of course, what happens? He gets an AI bot. And it says, please tell us how we can help you with your services. So my husband says, home television. Are you looking for cell phone assistance? No, home television. Are you looking for internet assistance? And as you can imagine, his voice is getting growlier and growlier and growlier as it goes on. So finally, I just said to him, I'm like, just keep repeating agent over and over and over again, because we were starting to hear some words that were not family friendly, because he was getting beyond frustrated. So he says, agent, would you like an agent to help you with that? Yes. I'm sorry, I didn't understand you. Agent, would you like an agent to help you with that? Yes. I'm sorry, I didn't understand. Like, over and over and over again. I don't know what it is about his voice, but the bot was not wanting to listen. And it was not bringing out the best side in my husband. And I can't say that I blamed him in that moment. When he finally got to speak to a human, the human was delightful. The human was one of the most helpful we've ever had when we've had to call into that company. And yet, all of it, all of the frustration, because while he was dealing with the bot, while he's waiting for them to give him the phone back or the phone call back, his search looked like this. Does company B use bots? Does company C use bots? How do I speak to a human if I call company B or company C? Because the thing is, it had frustrated him so bad. He just wanted to talk to a human. Now, it is very possible to use AI in ways that are going to enhance your business. But I also want to really bring it forward that if you're going to allow the human side of your business to drop out, you can't be upset when the humans who buy from your business also drop out. I am not anti-AI. I am, however, very anti-magic pill for the sake of just being magic. I was actually having this conversation with friends of mine in the last week here, and I said, here's the deal. Talking about AI, sexy. Talking about things that are like, feel like they would just work like magic, so sexy. Talking about having awkward conversations and being human, so definitely not the part that anybody wants to talk about. And yet here it is. That's where I'm staking my claim. Because yes, AI definitely has its advantages or it has its pluses, but there is an ultimate advantage available to every travel advisor who wishes to take up the fight for it. And that is the human edge advantage. And that is what we are going to be leaning into. Because here's the deal. You can post as much as you want on social media. I'm going to bet most people don't have a clue who you are, what you're talking about, or what you're doing, unless you're putting yourself into it. I will say in the last little while here, the influx of travel advisors using AI for their posts, like AI videos. Okay, frankly, some of them are downright creepy. They're sexist. They're kind of disgusting. Like unfollow levels, even though it's a travel advisor. And I'm like, heck to the no. Not that I was going to be your client, but if I had that level of a visceral reaction, I promise you your clients or potential clients probably do as well. Who knows? Maybe you found some clients, no judgment. Okay, no, I got to be honest. A little bit of creepy judgment because some of those videos were just ick, especially in today's world. But here's the deal. Being in business is not for the faint of heart. I've had a multitude of conversations over the last while. I actually recorded a podcast that's going to be coming out in a couple of months here with a sales expert. And one of the conversations that we had was in relation to a question that was in her book. And when I first wrote out the answers, I was like, but that's not really the answers. And so I went deeper and I realized, oh, wow. Okay. Because what I wrote in there, because one of the questions was, what do you do differently than anybody else in your industry? And why do you do it differently? And I don't remember exactly how I got from that specific question to going down the track of being really, frankly, pissed off. And the reason is what I wrote was I do what I do because I'm sick and tired of people using travel advisors like their tool, like another tool in their toolbox. And yeah, I'm going to ruffle some feathers with this one, but I'm okay with it. Because the thing is that if I ruffle a feather, I think that's my challenge to you to look at how you're doing this. But too many host agencies are treating travel advisors like unpaid employees, or worse yet, the amount of host agencies out there that are simply posting travel for free, live a laptop lifestyle. You can travel for free, which is a load of crap because all they want is to put you into a position so that you're paying them a monthly fee because they figured out they just want their monthly fee out of you. They don't really need you to sell anything more because they're getting the monthly fee. Because then they can go to a supplier and say, look, we have thousands of travel advisors. You're going to want to give us a better deal. Or they're going to want you to become the salesperson for them. See, my biggest frustration is host agencies and suppliers that do not see you, the travel advisor, as a business owner. See, I myself, when I owned a franchise, and this was owning a franchise brick and mortar agency, I realized even at that, at a franchisor level, that they had a hard time separating out a business owner from just somebody on their team or one of their employees. And I've decided that I'm not here for that. In fact, that was actually one of the number one reasons, and I don't think I've talked about this near enough. One of the number one reasons that I closed my office and went into business coaching, because I was sick and tired of small business owners in the industry or outside of, but now in particular in the industry, not actually being recognized as a business owner, not actually being given the credit it takes for the risks they're taking, for the getting to the ledge of uncertainty and still being willing to take the step. See, there's a lot of host agencies that really need the travel advisor to behave like an unpaid employee because they don't know what to do when they get a little bit of resistance, when they get a little bit of pushback, when they get a little bit of independence. When I was in Cancun for a conference, I remember doing this conference and they wanted us to, it was like a whole personalities test thing. And I remember that they gave a scenario, and the scenario was, and I don't remember the names of the scenario people were. So we're just going to say Sally. So Sally owned a travel agency. She wasn't charging service fees, but based on all of these personalities, because good grief, they wanted me to take 2 hours out of my life to fill out a personality study and then have every one of my staff members do the same thing so that I could learn how to properly manage them. And yet I didn't. I'm a little rebellious. I didn't do it. I'm okay with that. And when I got there and I saw how they were actually doing this, I'm like, thank heavens I didn't waste my time. But when we got there, so Sally needs to increase the revenues to her business. And Sally decided that the only way she can do that is by joining this business networking group. And it's a very expensive business networking group. So she's going to need to convince her staff they have to charge fees because they haven't been, but the only way she can afford to join this networking group is if she charges fees. And so how can Sally convince all of the staff based on their personality that they have to do this? And so they had us all broke up into small groups. That was fine. Table discussions. How are you going to do this? And I was beyond blown away by the amount of business owners in that room that went about doing the assignment. And I looked at the people at my table and I'm like, we're not doing this. Because in addition, it was like complaining that the time of day that these meetings were held, complaining about this, complaining about that. Like these were all of Sally's complaints. So how on earth, when you're coming from a place of like just sheer desperation, that the only way the business was going to survive was to join this networking group, and the only way to be able to afford it was to start charging fees, how can she convince? Like all of the language that was in there was wrong right from the start. And so I remember saying to my table, we're not doing this. And they're like, what do you mean? I said, first off, we're just going to figure out a strategy for how do we implement fees? Because first and foremost, if the networking group is that freaking expensive, we need to understand return on investment. We don't make those kind of investments if we don't know it's going to pay off. And here's the deal. When you do something that you don't want to do, that you basically, it was well known, she despised everything about it. She didn't like the way it was run. She didn't like this. She didn't like that. Like there were so many pieces to it. It was never going to be a good fit because everything was going to be coming from this place of scarcity and this place of, because I have to, and because that's the way it's always been done. And all of these stories that she had built up in her mind. And yet she was supposed to convince her staff that they had to charge fees so that they could go down the path of doing something else they really didn't want to do. That is how you spell disaster in business. Instead, we need to figure out a plan for implementing fees. Because first and foremost, you implement a proper fee strategy across your business. Who's to say you needed the networking group? There's a very good possibility that the difference in revenues would have offset the need to be a part of that networking group. 2, you would have come at it from an entirely different energy, an entirely different perspective. Not because you have to, not because you have to so that you have to be like, it was a whole domino effect of negative actions. So by approaching it differently, you also change the language from convince to persuade. Because when you have to convince somebody rather than bringing them along on the journey or providing an opportunity for them to be able to grow, it's an entirely different conversation. We're going to do some ethical persuasion because we're going to do it in a way that makes sense, in a way that adds value. Because here's the deal. It's not just quote unquote convincing the staff, because when that's the energy you're coming to it, you've now got to convince your clients. And so that was a framework that somebody who did not understand travel, who did not understand the program, who did not understand any part of our industry came up with. And you want to know something? That is what is going to happen when AI does the coaching in the industry. I will never forget the day when I was sitting at that table and somebody came up. They were the regional director for Eastern Canada. And she said to me, she's like, okay, great. So how are you guys going to do this? And I said, well, we're not. And I explained my reasons. And I just said, we're going to do it from this perspective instead. And then we're going to hold out and continue to look around for the right group. Because here's the deal. When you join a group just so you can figure out what you can take and not what can you give, you never win. In the long run, you absolutely will never, ever win when it is all about what can I take from somebody else. That's called an abusive relationship. When you enter into a relationship, business, personal, financial, whatever it is, when it is all about what can I take from somebody else, the long-term outcome of that is never good. So instead, I said to her, this is what we're going to do, and this is why we're going to do it. To which she proceeded to tell me, and I will, this was one of those, holy crap, I can't believe this happened moments. She looked at me, she goes, well, see, there's sometimes when head office tells me I have to do something that I don't want to. So I go and I tell my team and they don't want to do it, but they have to do it. And I looked at her and I said, but there's a very important difference. I looked at her and I pointed and I said, employee, pointed to myself and I said, employer. Here's the deal. You, as a travel agency owner, an independent consultant, an independent travel advisor, whatever it is your title is, you are in charge. You are responsible for the wins, which also makes you responsible for the losses. See, I think that's another thing sometimes, is that we're quite happy to let somebody else be in charge because then we don't have to take responsibility for our own losses. But then you can't say you're in business. Being in business means taking responsibility for those wins and the losses. But back to where we were, AI. There's too many pushes right now because again, it's super sexy. Let AI write all of your captions. Guess what? People are getting wise to that. Your captions look like everybody else's. We did Can't Be Seen last year, and there was a reason why we did it. It was because you have to be seen. We are living in a world of a trust deficit where people are losing trust all the time. They don't know who it is that they're actually seeing. In fact, recently here, I was like sharing things to my stories I was like, oh, cute video, share, share, share. Here's the deal. A lot of them were travel. It was right around Valentine's, and it was, what was it? The one was roses are red, the sky is blue. I can't wait till this is our view too. And it was a cruise. I have zero clue, even though I shared it, if it was a travel advisor, if it was just a person, if it was an influencer, if it was anything. Why? Just because it gets views does not mean it got remembered. The post itself got remembered. Who it was that posted it? No freaking clue. The same is true if you're using those systems that are going to auto post the supplier content for you. They're not going to remember who you are. They're going to remember who the supplier was. Guess what? They're going to cut you out of the process. Social media has changed. Content has changed. Your emails have changed. Like every piece of contact you have with your audience looks different, but is now received different. Even if you're doing the same thing you always were, it's now being received differently. Being in business means having to do the hard stuff. Now, I'm not saying it's all about how can we make life as hard as humanly possible, because hard can also be simple. In fact, when you figure out the hard parts, it's kind of that whole messy middle factor. It makes everything more simple. It makes it so that you have a framework by which you are going to look at everything, a lens through which everything gets looked at, where you have no question about what do I stand on this? Where do I believe on that? What is it that we do? But you have to decide what makes you replaceable, but more importantly, what makes you irreplaceable. How are you going to infuse your humanness into the process? How are you going to own the future of being human in travel? AI, it's there. It can be used, but use it as a tool. Don't be the tool it's using. What makes you irreplaceable? Well, let's talk about what makes me irreplaceable. It's my lived experiences, the good experiences, and definitely the bad ones. The perspectives, the connection, the freaking heartache along the way. One of the things that made me absolutely an irreplaceable travel advisor was my willingness to tell them, I don't think that's a good option. And the reason for that was because I've already been down that path. I will never forget our trip to Cabo. And I cried so much on that trip because I could not afford to get us out of there. That resort was terrible. I could not afford to get us out of there. So do you want to know what made me a great travel advisor? I told other families why they were better off waiting another 6 months to go on a vacation than they were to go on a vacation that they could barely afford. That would be the most miserable week of their life. Because here's the deal. I couldn't get that money back, but I can't get that time back. I had a terrible vacation. My husband had a terrible vacation. And because of that, my kids had a terrible vacation. We don't get to get that week back. Time is so precious to your clients, to you, to me, to everybody. We don't get time back. There is no time machine. And so if we are just going ahead and taking orders and going check, 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 book, 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 we're not doing what's in the best interest of our clients. And guess what? An order taker that goes check, 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 you are replaceable. You will be replaced. My advantage, that unique sauce, not that I can out AI anyone, but rather that I can feel that kick in the gut moment on a Sunday morning When you wake up, open social media to discover that all the flights in and out of Puerto Vallarta are done. They're canceled. Flights have been rerouted to Cabo. They've rerouted everybody. Nobody's in and out of Puerto Vallarta. Everybody in that whole region is to shelter in place. I know what that kick in the gut feeling was. In fact, I went for lunch today and I mentioned to a friend of mine, we were talking about this episode, and I said, I know what Sunday morning felt like. And she looked at me and she goes, you mean when Canada lost the hockey game? I said, see, that's what you remembered. I remembered oh my heavens, all those poor travel advisors. And I especially was heartbroken for my Canadians that had just rerouted everybody out of Cuba. And unfortunately, particularly for those more west, they probably rerouted them to Puerto Vallarta. I know what that feels like. You don't know Sunday morning when those flights were going to resume. And yet you knew that your clients wanted to know, not now, but like right now. When is my flight going to be taken off? I am stuck here. I have my kids. We are trapped. We are sheltered in place. Oh my heavens, you need to help me. I know what your nervous system did that morning. AI doesn't give a rat's butt about you or the client. It was purely data. AI is data. AI is algorithms. AI is coding. You are a human. You are the one who talks to your clients. You are the one that gets to know your clients. You are the one who can hear when your client pauses and you know there's something that needs to be said. I know what it means to sit across the desk from a client who comes in just after her husband has passed to tell you his final wish was for her to take the kids back to the last place he was happy. That was the trip to Jamaica that I had booked for them just 6 months before, because when they got home on Sunday, he'd gone to a routine doctor's appointment on Monday. And by Wednesday, he was told he had cancer. And within 2 weeks, they had opened him up, closed him up, and told him, get your affairs in order. Life changes that fast. I helped them rebook that vacation. I did anything and everything I could to make sure it was the most smooth operating, the most simple process for them. And when they got up from my desk and they walked back out of the office, I looked at the owner, because that was back when I worked for somebody else. I remember this as though it was today. And this is at this point, probably 17 years ago, 18 years ago now. I said, okay, we got this all looked after. You're good to go. I'll have your documents for you in another week. Okay, great. They got up, they walked out the door. I pushed back from my desk. I stood up. I looked at the owner and said, I'll be back when I'm back. And I went to the back and I cried and I cried because I was so heartbroken for them. I know what that vacation meant to them. I know what needed to happen on that vacation. I know what needed to be looked after. And I know on a human to human level how insanely important it was that we took care of them. That is what your advantage is. Not being an order taker. Not just being somebody who processes credit cards and gets them gone. And no shade to you. If that's the business you want to run, great. But I am telling you, there is a clock counting down till you are no longer needed. That is the type of business that AI replaces. You have to decide what kind of business you want to run. The internet came in 30 years ago and changed the game forever. Travel advisors are still here, but there are other ones that aren't, because there is a matter of evolving with technology, evolving with the industry. But there is also where you can't stay complacent. that you can't just do the same thing because you've always done the same thing, or worse yet, chase the shiny magic pill because it's just going to make everything easier. And like by magic, you're going to make all this money. Here's the deal. Travel is done by humans. Humans are looking for a human to guide them, to share with them. I am a believer in having things automated, but with that is making sure it is automated to enhance the human experience, not just to enhance your sales process so you can get it gone and get it done with. We have to look at this from the human experience side of it. What does this look like to the consumer? Not just what does it look like to you? Because your idea of a customer journey looks a whole lot different than your client's vision. Your messaging looks a whole lot different than it does to the potential client. Embrace your human side. Embrace the good, the bad, the ugly. Get your face onto social. Get your personal brand out there. Allow your personal brand to establish your authority. If you aren't stepping into the spotlight, somebody else will. And if you're not, you're going to fade away. You're going to fade into the back curtains. My challenge to you, figure out if you're building a replaceable business or an irreplaceable business. If you don't know what that looks like, if you don't know if you're building an irreplaceable business or how to go about building it, then I'm also going to invite you to come and join us in June of 2026. We are doing our first ever live in-person event for 2 days in Camrose, Alberta, so in central Alberta. And we are inviting a small group of travel advisors who dare to be different. This is not about sticking with status quo. This is about raising the standards. It is about owning the future and building an irreplaceable travel business by embracing your human edge. I'm going to link all of that up in the show notes. Again, if you have questions, reach out to me, Instagram, Art of Selling Travel, on our Facebook, Art of Selling Travel, or come join us in the free Facebook group. We would love to have you there. I'm going to link all of that up in the show notes for you. Being human is your greatest advantage. We can use AI to leverage the things that we don't do as well or don't do as quickly. But I am telling you that as we go forward, your ability to connect with people on a human level is going to be what sets you apart. If you were focused entirely on the transaction, you were focused entirely on how can we put as many bots in between as possible, you're going to lose. That's why you're listening to this podcast. This was not written by AI. I am not AI. And more importantly, when you come into our coaching programs, you're not going to get a coaching bot. In fact, I've talked with other coaches who are like, oh, no, I just have people submit questions and then I just answer them. And I always say to them, but their first question's rarely the real question. When we do hot seat coaching inside of tasks, a lot of times people ask a question and that's not actually the question that they need the answer to. Having context to everything is part of the human experience. And at this point, I don't see AI properly replacing a coach or a travel advisor who is willing to connect, who is willing to use their own perspectives, who's willing to say no, who's willing to advocate for the clients. You have an edge. It's called being human. Own it. Until next time, happy selling.